as executives, as chapter presidents, we want to extend a warm word of welcome to all. This evening, we're having a conversation, a symposium on the coronavirus and the vaccines. Perspectives through the lens of science, psychology, and theology. Before we begin, we want to invite Dr. Wellington to give us a word of invocation.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening with joy for the opportunity of sharing in this symposium information that can be of benefit to your children. We're glad you're interested in everything that happens to us. Be with the media that shall carry this information, and may all be done according to your will. May we all be blessed in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Northern Caribbean University family, and welcome you also to this very informative and important symposium on the coronavirus and vaccine safety and efficacy through the lens of science, psychology, and religion. I'd like to commend Mr. Harry Clayton, the president of the Northern Caribbean University Alumni Federation, and his team for putting together this symposium that is timely. We are treated to a star-studded panel in the various fields. And so we are in for a real treat this afternoon. And I hope that at the end, many of our questions will be answered. Whatever fears we may have had would be alleviated. And certainly all of us will learn a lot from the experts that have been assembled who are being so willing to share their knowledge with us. So sit back, have an enjoyable evening, and may God be with us as we seek to learn more about this wonderful world in which we live and this virus that has created so much challenge for the world at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Edwards, for your opening remarks and your kind welcome. It's quite a responsibility when you're an alum of an institution that has as its motto, Ubi Semper Decimus, which, as we are all quite conversant in Latin, we would say that means where learning never ends. And so this evening's symposium is an opportunity where we can continue this narrative, this conversation, being true to who we believe in terms of continual learning. And so we are so impressed, we are amazed, we are thankful for this star-studded panel that is brought together this evening and to share information with you. The responsibility is mine as I bring to you the objectives of this event. Firstly, to ensure that we bring a forum to share the most recent knowledge pertaining to the safety and efficacy of the coronavirus. We want to present spiritual and scientific examples and practical approaches for our one's belief system, whether religious, cultural, faith institutions can and should inform their health decisions. And finally, we want to enhance your well-being by showing the deleterious effect of the coronavirus on the mental, the physical, the social and spiritual self, and to empower all for holistic existence. Ladies and gentlemen, we say welcome and thank you for joining us. We'll have 3 segments. The first segment in science will be moderated by Dr. Sonia Copeland. Dr. Copeland currently serves as the chairperson of the Public Health Program at Northern Caribbean University. We also want to express our appreciation for her for sharing many years in the Ministry of Health and most recently before retiring as the Director for Health Promotion. The second panel will then be led by Dr. Alonzo Smith. Dr. Alonzo Smith is the Vice President of our NCU Alumni Federation, and he currently serves as the Executive Secretary for the Greater New York Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. He's a licensed counselor, both for mental and family therapy. Thank you, Dr. Alonzo Smith. In addition, he also served as the chair of this program this afternoon. So he was the facilitator behind this event this evening. And our third moderator will be Dr. Leon Wellington. Dr. Wellington is a retired church administrator serving as the president and the leader of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Jamaica, the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, Cayman Islands, and then moving on to serve as vice president, the longest serving vice president for the Inter-American Division covering for the Seventh-day Adventists. Thank you very much. And this time I'll turn over to our first moderator, Dr. Sonia Copeland.
Thank you, Chair. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce the panelists for the science panel. We have Dr. Hansel Fletcher, Professor and Vice Chair for the Division of Microbiology, and he is at the Loma Linda University. Our second panelist is Dr. Hope Dawes Campbell, Associate Professor of Pharmacy Practice, and she is at Belmont University. The third panelist is Dr. Wanda Pierre Drake, Infectious Disease Specialist, Professor of Medicine, Professor of Pathology, Microbiology, and Immunology. She's at Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. So help me to welcome all three stellar panelists. I now hand over to the moderator for the psychology panel.
We'll go into, before the moderator for the psychology, we'll go through the presentation first for your segment, Dr. Copeland, and then we'll get to the psychology panel after your presentation.
Thank you.
Certainly.
We will be presenting for you the different scientific studies and helping you to interpret some of the information, cutting edge information that we have out there in the area of vaccines, microbiology, and we will also try to put forward some of the questions that you are still struggling with, battling with. And so the first question goes to panelists, Dr. The first question is, the first COVID-19 vaccines were developed with authorized within a year, which seems pretty fast. How did this happen? Can I trust a vaccine that was developed so quickly? And so that question goes to Dr. Hope Dawes Campbell.
Before Dr. Dawes answers that question, I just want to give some background information on some of the basic things that we need to put in perspective before we launch into the question. So I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about the COVID-19, and some questions are some of the basic sciences behind the virus and the disease. So we're looking at the perspective from the sciences. And I just want to take us back to our time in history to look at some of the infectious disease outbreaks. And we have a lot more than I'm showing on the screen, but we can see how these infectious disease pandemics have devastated our population. We look going back to AD 165. We look at the Black Death. We look at the Black Death back in 1346 that devastated Europe with upwards of 100 million people dying, about a third of the population. In the 20th century, we see the AIDS pandemic that started, and we're still part of it. We still see that happening, but we've now come to the 21st century where we're facing COVID. When we go back and start thinking about a lot of our infectious diseases, there are some things that we don't remember. In fact, this population, our young people, probably don't remember some of these diseases because these are some that we have forgotten thanks to vaccines. One we do remember is the polio vaccine, and we see some pictures like this where we see the devastation of polio. We're still trying to eradicate polio from the face of the earth. We've made significant progress thanks to vaccines. And we see a lot of these other diseases. When I was going to school there in Jamaica, I was vaccinated against a lot of these diseases. Thanks to vaccine, those are significantly reduced. Vaccines are historically the way viral epidemics are definitely ended. That was a quote, which is certainly true, because we see the death of smallpox. This was announced back in 1980 by the World Health Organization, where smallpox was eradicated. We saw the last case in Somalia in 1977, thanks to vaccines. Now we come to COVID, and we have the coronavirus, and we hear about the vaccines. What are some of the issues there? And I know there are a lot of questions which we're going to highlight a little further into our discussion. We see we need to talk about the virus, and that virus, which is the severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, which is a SARS-CoV-2. And that virus causes the disease, the coronavirus disease, which is COVID-19, which is coronavirus disease 2019. So this pandemic started in 2019. Where we are with this pandemic, it's been devastating. Across the world, we look at the latest data. We see where over 230 million individuals have been infected with this virus in 192 countries and regions. We've seen worldwide over 4.7 million deaths. In the US, we've seen over 42 million individuals infected with over 687,000 deaths. And just focusing on Jamaica, we see where we have over 82,000 confirmed cases with over 1,800 deaths. And the number that certainly it will come back as we discuss this further. The population, about 7.5% of the population is vaccinated. So we need to work more on this. When we look at the virus, viruses are biological structures which contain genetic material and protein, and we have several different kinds of virus. The one that we're focused on is this coronavirus, which is an RNA virus, and it has some special features, and those features we're using to exploit to make a vaccine. Just to kind of give you a little orientation, if we look at the human cell, there are several compartments of the human cell. We have a nucleus, and we have the cytoplasm, and of course, we have our DNA. And everybody talks about DNA. That carries all the information. That carries all the information about the human body, and it's being. We can copy that into what we call the messenger RNA, and that messenger RNA can make specific structures. So you think about a house. We have the window plan, which is in the DNA. Once we copy that plan, certainly it's in the RNA, and then we can make the real windows, which becomes part of the house. It's very important to also think about where DNA is, where RNA is, as we talk about the vaccine, because vaccines are part vaccines are developed to mimic an infection without causing the disease. When we get infected with a virus, that virus will trigger an immune response, and it makes at least two types of cells will respond. We have we have a special type of cells, B cells, which will make antibodies that can attack invaders outside the cell. And we have another set of cells, those are your T cells, which can attack invaders inside the cell. And that's what that will, when we get infected, we can trigger a response. And so vaccines will trigger that response without causing the disease. This particular virus has one very important protein. This is the S protein, and this S protein, or the spike protein, will allow it to anchor to the cell. And once this happens and it's activated, then it can cause the disease. So knowing this information, we have used that strategy to make the vaccine. And several vaccines have been made. Right now, we have some that have been made using mRNA. We have some that have been used use a viral vector as part of that vaccine, or just that particular protein, that spike protein that has been used. Depending on the cost, as you can see on the screen, they vary in cost. With the AstraZeneca, which is one that's used in Jamaica, the cost per dose is about $4 US. And we're going to come back a little bit and talk about some of the differences and which one do we choose depending on where we are. But there are several vaccines that are now available, and they're very good in preventing severe disease. The Moderna and the Pfizer, those are your mRNA type vaccines. They give about 94 to 95% efficacy, and we have several that are very good in preventing the disease. Once we take the vaccine, there's some side effects that we see, some common side effects. There might be a little inflammation at the site of the injection, or you may have some fever, some chills, a little fatigue, or some muscle pain or headache. These are some common side effects that will subside within 24 to 48 hours. For the vaccine, for the mRNA vaccine, just a quick overview. The mRNA, the message that carries that particular protein, it's enclosed in a lipid envelope and it's injected into the body. It does not go into the nucleus. It just allows the body to make these cells. It induces your immune system that will then produce these cells that will protect us against the virus. So it goes in, that protein is being made, and that protein then trigger these cells to make antibodies to protect us from the disease. The AstraZeneca and also the Johnson & Johnson, they use a viral vector, and that viral vector does not replicate in the body. Once it gets into the cell, it allows that spike protein, that special protein, to be translated, to be made. It then induces the immune system to give us protection. Once we get this protein and we get protection, mutation can occur, but the antibodies can still be effective, because it sees a whole protein and it makes antibodies against several parts of this protein. So if you get a mutation in one area, you still have other areas that the body has antibodies for, so it will protect it. And that's why we have different antibodies that recognize different parts of the same protein that we can still be protected. Antibodies are these antibodies that are being made that is triggered by these particular components. When we look back in history to look at the vaccines that have been made, we look at the polio vaccine. It took 47 years to make that polio vaccine. We look at the measles vaccine. We even look at the hepatitis A vaccine. The AIDS, there is not yet an effective AIDS vaccine, and it's been a lot of time. So how come this vaccine for the coronavirus has been made so quickly? And that's because of some of the advances in technology. Once that virus was identified, within 10 days, we knew the sequence that was shared around the world with different researchers. We were in the process also of making vaccines against other coronavirus. So we use what we learned to make this. And of course, government and private sector partnership. And of course, the FDA emergency use authorization. In the next 30 seconds, I'll just explain how safe these vaccines are and the process that it goes through. It goes through several steps. The first phase, we test those in animals. And we have a first phase where we ask, is it safe? And here we look at a small group of people and we try to find the lowest dose that will give a response. And then we move to phase 2 to look to see how effective it is. And we use a larger group of about 500 to 1,000. And in the third phase, we use, this is tested in individuals worldwide, up to about 40,000 volunteers to look at its safe and effectiveness. And then once the FDA evaluates that data, then it's being administered. And of course, there's a phase 4, which has now begun, where we look at this vaccine response in millions of people around the world over a long period of time to make sure this vaccine continues to be safe and effective. So this vaccine is safe. And of course, it's a good decision. It's a good decision to take this vaccine because it is safe. The cost benefit far outweigh the risks. And if you value life, certainly we're going to protect life. And with that, I will go back to the panel as we further discuss some questions that we have.
Thank you, Professor Fletcher. In my haste to get to the questions, we would have missed out on this valuable presentation, where you took us through the history of some of the more recent viral disease outbreaks we've had. Vaccines, were seen as the solution to many of these and the structure of the human cell. So we are very clear now where the DNA lies in the RNA. So hopefully we have clarified this. So going back to the first question, and you have touched on it a bit, but we'll be looking at, and the question is asking, how comes we have developed so quickly this vaccine? How did this happen? And can I trust a vaccine that was developed so quickly? So we will now ask our panelists to respond, and that is Professor Hope Dawes Campbell.
Thank you very much, Dr. Copeland. This is a very common question. One individual said to me in typical Jamaican dialect, it sounds like it's a hurry come up. In fact, it's what appears to have been, why it came up so quickly, as Dr. Fletcher described, were a number of reasons. Financial backing from the government. It takes quite a bit of money to do clinical trials, and the government, through Operation Warp Speed, poured a lot of money into the development of a vaccine. Fortunately, there were some technologies that were already in place. There was an infrastructure, if you want to say, that was in place on which these COVID vaccine trials were able to adopt. The personnel, the facilities, all those that were previously available and developed and fine-tuned as we were trying to find a vaccine for HIV were able to be adopted and expanded upon to create the coronavirus vaccine trials network. We also did current phases. Dr. Fletcher talked about phase 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. And we were able to not cut any corners, but to do it sequential, concurrently in some cases, once certain breakpoints were achieved. There was, of course, additional, probably the greatest collaboration we've ever seen between manufacturers and government agencies, as well as the biggest, I think, is that so many labs were working on a single goal. And because we were in a pandemic, it was much easier to find subjects to be enrolled in the study. And because it was a pandemic, they were certainly exposed, were at risk for the disease. And so we could get to our endpoints to conclude the study in a shorter time period than you would have normally had it not been a pandemic. So all those things put together allowed us to have a vaccine that was a faster. The last one that was anywhere close was MUMS. That was 4 years. So very good. And we can trust it because the federal FDA, the CDC did not cut any corners at all in terms of going through the process of approving.
Right. Thank you. Thank
Copeland,
you.
if it's okay, I'd just like to add that unlike other infectious agents that Dr. Fletcher outlined, coronaviruses aren't new. This is just the first time we've had a coronavirus that could cause such severe infection in humans. So for the last 20 years, various researchers throughout the United States and Europe have been studying coronaviruses. So one of the reasons also they were able to develop a vaccine so quickly is that they've been studying this virus for 20 years. We just didn't have, I mean, everybody's had coronavirus infection before. You've had common cold. The odds are overwhelming that it was a coronavirus because that's the common cause of the common cold. It is a common cause of the common cold. The problem is this virus was able to cause death. So they were able to move rapidly with what they knew about other coronaviruses, MERS, SARS, bat coronavirus, and then extrapolate that to humans. And also the FDA, typically when you do clinical trials, you get in line behind everybody else. But each coronavirus trial was moved to the front of the line. And so that also facilitated getting approval faster because they didn't make them get behind everybody else because people were dying.
Thank you, Professor Drake. And so we were not at ground zero.
Right, yes.
It has been years and years of research.
Oh yes, at least 2 decades.
Right, decades of research. But yet that did not come through clearly in the early communications that we heard from the international authorities for world health. And we did not hear that for some other specialists who were speaking on the issue. And I think the public can appreciate that. So it was warp speed. When we spoke about warp speed, some thought it was unfortunate, a description, because it fed into those persons who thought this is too fast, something isn't right. Next question, we go back to the question, especially here in Jamaica, some persons are still asking this question, Professor Campbell, why is Jamaica getting AstraZeneca? AstraZeneca, when we're hearing internationally, especially for some of our neighbors, that they have been getting the others, the Pfizers, the Johnson & Johnson, the Moderna. Can you respond to that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. The bottom line with all the vaccines, while they may have varying efficacy percentages for symptomatic disease, one of the things that our goal is actually to prevent severe disease, which will cause you more than likely to be hospitalized, and death. And all the vaccines, regardless of their how effective they are against symptomatic disease, they are basically 100% effective against you dying. And that, at the end of the day, is the best thing. Dr. Fletcher also had a slide that showed the cost it costs more money, for example, to make the mRNA vaccines than it does the AstraZeneca. And so it is understandable that as countries have to manage budgets, et cetera, the constraints of that vaccine that was effective but less costly would be chosen. Plus, the different vaccines have the ability of storage being very different. Pfizer, for example, requires ultra cold storages. That becomes a problem distributing that vaccine. Whereas, for example, the AstraZeneca being available at room temperature is a great option for individuals. Everyone should be comfortable taking any of these vaccines.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Professor Campbell. Another frequent question, we have these frequently asked questions, and could you help our audience to understand, Dr. Drake,
Yes, ma'am.
which is better, natural immunity or acquired immunity?
That's an excellent question, and not one that is a yes or no, a single word answer. So there is plenty of literature that demonstrates that when patients are infected, particularly if you're less than 65 years of age, that you mount protective immunity against the virus. The problem is because the virus is mutating, so the incidence of reinfection with COVID is very low. It's about 1%. And we do know symptomatic reinfection, because we do know in studies where you follow patients after their infection that they can actually get reinfected, but they don't have symptoms. So the incidence of symptomatic reinfection is about 1%. The problem is if you're older than 65 years of age and there are varying strains, then the risk of reinfection goes up. For example, they had an outbreak in Massachusetts at a county fair, and 75% of the people who got infected were revaccinated, had already been vaccinated, but they had been vaccinated against the alpha strain, and they were reinfected with the Delta strain. So with these viruses mutating, one has to appreciate that just having COVID against one strain, if a new strain starts to circulate, your immune system may not be effective enough against it. The other data that we have, and to me, it's not the strongest data, so I'm a little reluctant to quote it, but a group reported an outbreak in Kentucky, and they showed that patients who were vaccinated were 2.34 times less likely to have symptomatic infection compared to people who were not vaccinated. So everybody had gotten COVID infection, and then a group had gotten vaccinated after their COVID infection. And they showed that those that had gotten vaccinated after their COVID infection were less likely to get reinfected. But I went through the data in detail, and it's actually not very strong.
Yes.
So I think something for people to remember, if you were my parents, I would say, if you're over 65 years of age, just having COVID does not guarantee you protective immunity.
Mhm.
You actually may not mount a strong enough immune response. And so when you get the vaccine, it gives your immune system another chance to see the protein and to try to fight it once again. So that's something to remember. I think the other thing for people to remember is that we need to be aware of the circulating strains. As we go through alpha, beta, then delta, which cause a lot of infection. Now we're starting to see mu.
After, yes.
Yeah, so all these strains are coming through, and your alpha protection may not help against mu. I mean, they just had an outbreak in Oregon, and a lot of people who were vaccinated against alpha, and it didn't seem to protect that much against this mu strain that's coming through.
Yes.
So I think you have to be really aware, pay attention to what strain is circulating. You can go to the CDC and actually look at the data. Don't read what they say. Just look at the data for yourself and read it. And then the other thing I do want to say, this is when it's important to be a Christian. I mean, we talk about the 10 spies that didn't want to go into the promised land because they didn't have faith. Guys, this is when it's important to be a Christian. It's not when everything's working out all right. It's when you have questions about stuff. It's when it's a pandemic that's killing people. That's when you need to be able to go to your bedroom and pray, and God will tell you if you need to take the vaccine or not. But don't be walking around talking about I ain't going to take the vaccine. Maybe this is what he designed to protect us, or maybe he knows something about your immune system and you shouldn't take it. But there's a God in heaven that knows if you should take the vaccine. It's Christian presumption to be walking around here, talk about I ain't gonna take no vaccine and it's killing people, you know?
Yes.
So I'm just encouraging people to pray. That's why we're Christians.
Yes. Thank you.
There is also something else I want to add, if I can jump in on this.
Right.
When you take the vaccine, and certainly I encourage everybody to take it. I've taken it. Loma Linda University, I just want to let you know, we have delivered upwards of 150,000 doses of the vaccine, both to our university, across our university, and our community. So we are big advocates, and it works. In our school, upwards of 90%, 97% of our students are vaccinated. Now, when you take the vaccine, it does not, the vaccine triggers an immune response that the way it is delivered, there is a particular antibody that's being produced that is important for mucosal immunity, which is IgA. The antibody, the vaccine does not trigger that IgA effectively. So you can get infected. You won't come down with symptomatic disease, but you can get infected. That's why in closed areas, those who've been vaccinated, we still ask you to wear your mask, because the antibodies that will protect the infection in your nostrils or in your mucosal area, that is not generated in a robust way. What's being generated is an IgG. That one takes care of systemic disease that would prevent the virus from spreading within the body.
Yes.
But you won't come down with the disease. You need to take the vaccine. And it's very, very effective. Very, very effective.
We're almost out of time. And but Professor Fletcher, we had a question for you. We have been putting a lot of our highly scientific public health, medical jargon, in how we communicate out there. And the public has been hearing very technical language. We're talking about nanoparticles, and then it is used, unfortunately, to create more fear. Could you help us to, well, we don't have much time, but could you just comment on this briefly, please?
All right, so I'll just comment on that briefly. We hear about nanoparticles, and people are saying, well, it seems as if the government is putting in these things that can track us. That's not so. That is not true. Especially these nanoparticles that you hear about, it's part of the vaccine for Moderna and Pfizer. We have this RNA that's carry the message for that spike protein. To protect that protein, they use these lipids to kind of package it to protect it and allow it to get into the cell. We have a lot of lipids in our body, and that's what we're using. So it's inert. It's not doing any damage to the body. It's just protecting that RNA so it can get into the cell. Once it gets into the cell, it does not go in the nucleus. So yes. it will not modify your DNA. None of these vaccines that are made for the coronavirus will modify your DNA. It does not go to the nucleus. It stays in the cytoplasm, it makes that protein, and the body sees that protein, and it makes the appropriate response to protect us. And that's what it is doing. So none of these are our DNA, and anybody tells you that, they don't know what they're talking about. These vaccines will not modify your DNA. The coronavirus vaccine will not modify your
right. We are completely out of time.
Oh.
I know that Professor Drake wanted to jump in, but perhaps we'll get an opportunity at the end. Yeah. So I just want to thank our outstanding faculty of presenters. And certainly for me, I've been working in the field for a very long time, but I have learned a lot. I think what has struck me is the clarity with which you, all three panelists, have communicated their knowledge and their understanding of the coronavirus and vaccines. So we now will hand over to the second moderator, Dr. Alonzo Smith. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you so much. Our president, Dr. Clayton, I saw you wanted to come in, but you were muted. Is there something you want to say before I move on?
Well, I think I was just going to accommodate Dr. Drake in terms of wrapping up that final thought. I think she had something that was quite pressing, but if she's not there.
Oh yeah, no, I'm here, but I can wait till afterwards, not a problem.
Yes, okay,
Thank you
fine.
so much.
That was basically, but thank you very much. I just wanted to pause and just say thank you, Dr. Copeland, for leading us in the first segment. Just want to assure everybody that at the end, we will have time and we'll be revisiting back some of these questions. We see the comments coming in, and certainly these will be addressed. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Simon.
Thank you, Dr. Clayton. Wow, what a powerful segment we had, the signs. And these individuals have done such an excellent job. For those of you who might have joined us after we announced the topic, we're looking at the coronavirus and vaccines, perspectives from science, psychology, and religion. We have heard the science, and we will move now in the psychology aspect of it. You know, as of Friday, September 24 of this year, over 231 million cases of the coronavirus had been recorded worldwide. These have psychological implications. Here in the United States, we have the highest number of recorded COVID-19 deaths, 704,237. And our country is followed by Brazil and India. COVID is officially the deadliest pandemic for many countries. Again, in the United States, we have surpassed the 1918 influenza, which estimated to have killed 675,000. We have surpassed that. We have a problem. The debate is raging. But not only do we look at this issue from a scientific perspective, but the psychological, because these deaths are causing emotional trauma. They are causing depression. They are causing all kinds of conspiracy theory to develop. So I have with me two capable and eminent individuals to help me through this area. First of all, we have Dr. Turban Bergland. Dr. Bergland is an MD and also a psychiatrist. He's the Associate Director for Health Ministries at the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. He's had the privilege of presenting many seminars around the world, and we're happy to have him with us this evening. Next, we have Dr. Barrington Brennan, native of his beautiful country, Nassau, Bahamas. I've known him for some time. As a matter of fact, we were schoolmates in college. He's a counselor, a marriage and family therapist, a pastor. He has served as a family life director and has done many presentations, and as a therapist has dealt with this issue on an individual case. So, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, I present these two individuals. First, I ask Dr. Turban Bergland to make his 7 to 10 minutes presentation. Welcome, Doc. We're happy to have you, and God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Happy to be with you. And as a psychiatrist, there's so many aspects of this pandemic that are interesting. I'm a medical doctor also, so all these physiological aspects, the vaccine, everything, it's also very important and interesting. But we have for sure seen that this pandemic has had a significant impact on most of us. I think most of us have in some way or another felt this pandemic. We are going to talk about various aspects of that. Now what I will focus on, like I have a short presentation initially, is about the conspiracy theories and how those have blossomed seemingly during this pandemic. There's huge discussions, and that's one of the reasons also why we have this vaccine hesitancy that we are experiencing and struggling with. Many people don't know what to do. Many people have made up their mind. I got my vaccine as soon as I could get it. I have friends who have not gotten the vaccine. I talked with a friend yesterday that was very concerned about the mandates, even thinking that she might close down her business and leave the country because of this. So this has major impact on people's lives. And what I would like to do is just have like a short presentation from like a more psychological level. How do we understand conspiracy theories? What is the nature of conspiracy theories? Because I think that can be helpful. So I will share my slides with you. First, this is not the first time we encounter conspiracy theories. There are lots of conspiracy theories out there. One of them, which you might not be aware of, is this chemtrail conspiracy theory. Most of us, we've seen planes flying in the sky, and we've seen these condensation trails that they leave. For most of us, that's just sort of information that a plane passed over our heads. Some people, they see more than that. And it's been quite common, or conspiracy theories about, in the US, they've estimated that about 2.6% of the total population, that would mean about 8 million people in the US fully believe in this conspiracy theory. And that's a conspiracy theory that basically says sort of, well, it's not one interpretation, but some say it's about solar radiation management. Some say it's the government that is trying to change the weather. Some say it's the government trying to manipulate us psychologically. Some say this has to do with population control, fertility. You may recognize the themes in this chemtrail theory, how some of these themes, you see them also in the conspiracy theories surrounding COVID-19. Some things think that chemtrails, they are about biological and chemical warfare. Does it sound somewhat familiar to what we are experiencing also with the conspiracy theories surrounding COVID-19? So this is something that we as human beings do, and estimates are that maybe as many as 50%, half of the population, believe in some kind of conspiracy theory or another. How would we define what a conspiracy theory is? This is one definition that says a conspiracy theory is the belief that a number of actors join together in secret agreement in order to achieve a hidden goal, which is perceived to be unlawful or malevolent. So there's some components of this. It's a belief. It's not a fact, it's a belief. It can be true, it may not be true. That's the important thing. We know that conspiracies happen. That's a fact. Conspiracies happen. There are many stories about conspiracy in the history of this world. So having an alertness, a sensitivity, a caution, and a suspicion that maybe conspiracies are going on, that's reasonable. The challenge is that many of these conspiracy theories lack evidence, they lack proof, and many of them have also been thoroughly disproved, but still people believe in them. So it's a belief that multiple, at least two actors, individuals or entities, often in secret, have some kind of hidden goal that is suspicious, that is unlawful, that is malevolent, that is there and potentially will harm me or others. Bit more elaborate on this. What are some key critical ingredients of a conspiracy theories. This is from a book in 2018. It's called The Psychology of Conspiracy Theories. And the author, a researcher on these phenomenons, he proposes 5 typical critical ingredients. One is that there are certain patterns. A conspiracy theory connects the dots, say establishing a connection between non-random actions, objects, or people. So they propose that there are connections there which may or may not be there. The other aspect is agency. They propose that there's someone who has an intent, a purpose by doing this. Someone is behind it. It's a different way of saying it. Number 3 is that there's some kind of coalition, which we already talked about. There are multiple actors. And number 4, the intentions are hostile. It's evil intent, it's selfish intent, something that is not for the benefit of the public or for individuals or for myself. So it's someone doing something with a hostile intent for it. And then number 4, 5 is that there's secrecy around this. This coalition that operate in secret, their purpose, their methods, it's not up in the open. And by that, sort of by this secrecy, it's clear also that by definition, conspiracy theories are unproven. That doesn't mean that people don't fully believe in them, that they're fully convicted, that they are true, that by definition, conspiracy theories still remain to be proven, unless, of course, they have been disproved. Why do people believe in conspiracy theories? There are many reasons, and there are various reasons for that. One important thing is that we desire certainty in our lives. We want to know what's going on. And we've seen that also with this pandemic. Of course, there have been lots of uncertainty on so many levels, and people, they're trying to figure out what's going on. There's been lots of fear, there's sense of danger, there's been threat to ourselves or to others. We also know that people who have a tendency to distrust others, they are more likely, more prone to also believe in conspiracy theories. Other aspects, when people feel powerless, when they have anxiety, when they have what we call anxious attachment style, or they have this general anxiety about life and existence, they may also be more prone to conspiracy thinking and believing conspiracy theories. Groups or individuals or groups that somehow feel that they're marginalized, that they're ignored, that they're cast out, may also be more prone to conspiracy theories. And lastly, we all need to feel that we matter. We need to feel that we are significant in some way. And for some people, going into conspiracy theories can make them feel that they are important. It can boost their self-esteem. They can feel that they are in the know of something that others are not. And we also know that it may be correlated to traits of narcissism, this feeling like excessive self-focus and inflation of self-image and self-importance. My last slide is just making a connection between conspiracy theories and fanaticism and fanatics. I really appreciate this definition of fanaticism. And I think when you see these traits, I think you will see many of them that in people who hold on to, cling to conspiracy theories against all the evidence that may be there, they may have many of these traits. Some traits here, a fanatic is dogmatic. He insists that his theories, his ideology, his solutions are the correct ones. He is certain about what he believes, or he insists that he is right. The other problem is that a fanatic is an obscurantist. He ignores or cannot perceive arguments, facts, or consequences that refute his solutions. And this is a problem that we all have in many ways. That is something goes against what we believe, what we are convinced about. May have the tendency to ignore it. That's not good scientific practice, and that's not a good way of living life. We need to take all things into consideration. And finally, a fanatic is authoritarian. When he has the power, he tries to impose his answers on others. And we've seen quite a bit of that. We often see that in tense situations like what we are now, that people also become violent. They resort to power, to imposing their will on others, and that's tragic, and that's dangerous. So that's just a short some perspectives on how to understand more about the nature and dynamics of conspiracy theories.
Thank you, Dr. Bergland. Thank you very much. Wow. In this time of a pandemic, we can see the impact of an infodemic that seems to be so wide and widespread. Thank you very much. Dr. Smith, I think we are operating in a virtual space, and I don't know, but I know we don't believe in the rapture, but he's not here. Nonetheless, we work as a team, and as doctor, I think I now see him reappearing. But we'll go right into the questions. Dr. Smith, I see you're back on screen. So we'll get right into the questions now.
Yes. Unfortunately, I'm in a hotel room and the internet is unstable, but I am here. Thank you. I heard most of your presentation, Doc, and I'm very thankful. Dr. Barrington Brennan, are you there with us? Dr. Barrington Brennan, can you unmute yourself? I have a question for you. Are you there? Okay, I'm not hearing him.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now.
Okay, I'm right here. Sorry.
Here's my first question for you. As a therapist, how would you relate to a situation like a mother is saying, I feel responsible for causing my son's death because I told him not to take the vaccine. And now I am guilty. I am feeling guilty. How do you relate to such a mother?
Guilt is very serious, and that is not an unusual situation now. There are many family members, mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, relatives, who are feeling guilty because they told their friend, partner, relative not to take the vaccine. Now, guilt can be good, but it can also be all-consuming. And note that because you feel guilty doesn't mean you are guilty. And one writer said, our irrational brain will find just about anything to feel guilty about. Despite being irrational, the guilt can be all-consuming. So there are so many ways, rather, that we can help someone who feels guilt because they feel that they caused the death of their son, daughter, or relative. Here are a few tips, just a few. Acknowledge that the guilt is normal, a normal grief emotion, and don't minimize it, validate it, okay? That's very important. Guilt is normal, yes. But then another point is to talk it over with others, with people. Don't minimize the feelings. Talk about your guilt with professional, a confidant, a therapist, someone who can help you through this challenge. It is not unusual to feel guilty because you think you caused the death. Now, you went only by the information that you thought you had, even though it may have come from a negative place. Now, examine your thoughts. The third point, examine your thoughts. Often our guilty thoughts, whether rational or irrational, they can start to consume us. They can drag us down into a bottomless pit. And so it's important not to isolate yourself, fill yourself with wine, beer, or ice cream. No, examine your thoughts and not allow this to take you to another kind of addiction also. Last point, which is a big one, forgive yourself. Easier said than done, right? Remember that forgiveness does not mean condoning or excusing. Forgiveness is important for you to help you find healing and solace and deal with your pain. It does not mean that you will forget it or it will go away, but you can find ways of coping. These are just some of the points, 4 points to help us deal with the guilt.
Thank you so much. Yes, guilt is an awesome and terrible thing for one to experience, especially during a crisis. I'm going to tie another question to that because there are some connection there. COVID is causing unexpected deaths of so many people close to me. How do I handle this loss when I'm losing church members, I'm losing family members, I'm losing co-workers, people who have been close to me over these years? How do I handle this loss?
In the past 2 weeks, almost every other day, a close friend or a close associate of mine has died due to COVID-19. And I've read just this morning of husband and wife and a child died in the Bahamas, and then last week the same. So this death is all around us. It's people who we thought don't even have the capacity of dying, if I should say such a thing, are dying. And it's very difficult, unexpected death. It will cause sometimes what we call complicated grief, okay? 5 years ago, we didn't have such unexpected deaths. Now it's happening at our doorsteps and even in our homes, all right? And this can lead to serious grief and loss and complicated grief. So let's give some tips quickly how to deal with it. One, a very common one, avoid media overload. I say that because everyone is on the TV or on the radio or on their WhatsApp or Pinterest or Snapchat or whatever it is, or WhatsApp, getting the news from friends or relatives. Avoid the media overload. Allow yourself just an hour a day, 2 hours a day to catch up, or 30 minutes a day to catch up on what you need to do about the information. Okay, that's very important. Another point is to make sure you talk about it again. Talk to relatives, talk to friends, talk to professionals. If you are a caregiver, it is imperative that you listen to them, because unexpected death can really challenge you. And people dealing with funeral costs in the Bahamas way, and the obituaries are 3 times the size. They have to go in the other parts of the paper to put the obituary in. Know that your feelings are valid. Grief is messy and a natural response to loss. So there's no right way to grieve. So don't let someone tell you, don't cry, don't do this, don't do that. Well, you need to talk on your own time, but you need to talk and know that your feelings are valid, okay? And it's so important to understand that loss can be shocking and difficult to comprehend, and very, very difficult to manage emotionally. But if you can find a support group, a good therapist, an understandable, compassionate pastor, then you would be able to manage through this tough time. So what's your thoughts?
Yes.
They may derail you. Give yourself some time to adjust.
Thank you so much. And as they say, grieving never ends. It only changes.
That's
Thanks
right.
for those. Thanks. I come back to you, Dr. Bergland. It has been documented that people with chronic illness have a high likelihood of having a mental health disorder. Is there any correlation between individuals with COVID-19 diagnosis and mental health illness?
I think we've seen plenty of reports on that, that a significant part of the suffering related to COVID-19 is also the mental health aspect of it. I don't think we know quite yet the exact number, how many will develop a mental illness who catches COVID, but it's probably the indications are maybe like 20-30% at least suffer from a mental illness as part of the process of going through the illness. And that's not surprising in any way. The circumstances of being sick in itself is a huge stress, a burden on many ways, and a very unpleasant experience. And some are even traumatized, may have a PTSD type reaction after having been severely ill. So just the fact of being sick is a major risk factor in this sense, being sick in this way for developing a mental illness. But then, of course, it seems, and that's also very understandable, that illness itself predisposes for developing mental illness. We know that having an inflammatory state in the body really can be something that part of that is then that you have emotional reactions to that, depression, anxiety, just from the inflammation. And having an infection like this really is setting the whole body in alarm state where the immune system is very active. And we know that many of us, if you've been sick, often we don't feel well also emotionally when we are sick. And that is, of course, what's happening also with COVID-19, that it predisposes. And then we see also that what we call like long COVID, people who don't recover quickly, but they suffer, and that's a significant proportion of the ones who get sick. They may struggle with both physical and emotional fatigue for a long time. So there's definitely, as part of the whole COVID syndrome, mental illness is a major and a significant part of it for sure.
Thank you very much. Well said. Gentlemen, I have a question for each of you before I close my section. So I'll give you both 2 minutes to answer your question. Dr. Brennan, here's your question. Caregivers on all levels, whether medical doctors, mental health professionals, social workers, etc., are facing a seemingly unending surge of COVID-19 patients and clients. Many do not have the time for self-care. Thus, some are experiencing what we call compassion fatigue. Then there are others who must provide empathic engagement with families or individuals who suddenly have lost a loved one, thus experiencing what we call vicarious trauma. So I would like, how do we deal with these? I want you to focus your response in the category of compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. Go ahead, 2 minutes. You're muted.
Just about every caregiver experiences compassion fatigue. So how do we deal with it? Simple stuff like you got to allow yourself to take a break. While dealing with some nurses on the staff who seemingly had endless working hours, I had to talk about how they can even take a break while they're on the job. Live the moment. Avoid worrying about the next day. And a simple one is to get the blood circulating, the oxygen in your mind. Exercise a lot. Exercise is one of the best ways to manage compassion fatigue and COVID fatigue. And then again, like I said in the first two segments, talk to friends, talk to colleagues, talk to others. Take care of yourself mentally, physically, professionally, socially, and spiritually.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Come to you now, Dr. Bergland. Statistics shows that during the pandemic, 35.8% of adults reporting symptoms of anxiety disorder, 28.4% with symptoms of depressive disorder, and 41% with symptoms of anxiety and/or depressive disorder. Could one use this data as one possible reason why one should be vaccinated? And if so, why?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think these figures about the prevalence, how common mental illness has become and symptoms of mental illness had become, we got those numbers very early on, and I don't think that they have declined much. So there's a huge proportion of the general population, whether they've had COVID or not, who have been struggling with symptoms of anxiety, depression, substance abuse, various kinds of issues. I'm not sure how sort of we would use that as an argument, but for sure, I think the argument is let's get this pandemic behind us as soon as possible, because it's causing people significant suffering. The sooner we can exit and this pandemic, the sooner people will be able to resume normal life, which includes meeting many of the needs that have been not sufficiently satisfied during this pandemic, like connecting with other people, working in the way that we are used to, and of course also all the grief and suffering that goes directly with people being sick. So I think the argument would be sort of, let's get out of this pandemic as soon, let's do whatever we can to get out of this pandemic so that people around us don't need to suffer needlessly, whether that is physically or it's emotionally, socially, or even spiritually because of this. And my appeal in the midst of this also, let's be nice to one another, because we're all in this together and people are all suffering, but we've seen so much hostility, so much aggressiveness, and people are fighting both within the church and outside the church. And I wish sort of that we could be nice with one another and treat one another with respect, even if we disagree on issues in this.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for the contributions you brought to the table. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the coronavirus and vaccines, perspectives from science, psychology, and relation. We've looked at the science, we've just completed the psychology. We want you to understand that there are certain psychological implications with this coronavirus. It's not just the scientific approach or the scientific effect, but also a psychological one. Thank you for listening. God bless.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we're going to move right on to our third segment, and immediately after our third segment, we'll be taking all the questions to other panelists. So over to you, Dr. Wellington.
Thank you very much, Dr. Harry. It is a pleasure to be with you this evening to further explore this theme that we have studied. Thanks to those panelists who have come before, I have been tremendously educated this evening, and I believe that our listening audience, our viewing audience, have appreciated that as well. Now, welcome to this third segment of the symposium, in which we'll be exploring the theme coronavirus, pandemic, and religion. Now, the Seventh-day Adventist Church places strong emphasis on health and well-being. As a matter of fact, since 1863, the very same year of the organization of this church, it adopted on its platform the health principles in helping us to achieve and maintain good mental, physical, social, and spiritual health. And so this evening, we have two eminently qualified persons on set to explore with us the religious aspect of this theme. Now, with 30 minutes, I warn the audience, you will not get all your questions answered. It's just not possible. So we're going to be taking it as far as we can. Our first panelist is Dr. Orlando Moncrief. He grew up in the old capital of Jamaica, Spanish Town, where he got his early education, went on to West Indies College, Northern Caribbean University, and then on to Andrews University for his master's, and Duke University for his PhD degree in 1993. We are happy that he did come back to Northern Caribbean University and spent 14 of his working years there in service to the youth. And then he moved on to the Caribbean Union College, spent 4 years there, and then 7 years at Atlantic Union College in the United States, serving in various capacities, professor of religion and administrative areas as well. Now, Dr. Moncrief has been recognized for his service over the years, and I'm talking about many years. He has given 51 years of his life in service to this church, and we want to appreciate those years as well. Our second panelist and presenter is Dr. David Williams. He is the Florence Sprague Norman and Laura Smart Norman Professor of Public Health and Chair of the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. He's also a professor of African and African American Studies and Sociology at Harvard University. Before serving there, he spent 6 years at Yale, 14 years at the University of Michigan, holds a Master in Public Health degree from Loma Linda University and a PhD in sociology from the University of Michigan. Now, Dr. Williams is an internationally recognized social scientist focused on social influences on health. He has been invited to be keynote scientific conference speaker in Europe, Africa, Australia, Middle East, South America, and across the United States. So he has researched and enhanced our understanding in complex ways, socioeconomics, race, stress, racism, health behavior, and religious involvement that can affect our health. And I think that's principally why we have asked him to be here. He has received numerous honors and awards. He has authored more than 475 scientific papers and has served on the editorial board of 12 scientific journals. So we have both a scientist, a religion person here to help us this evening. And so without further ado, I'm going to invite Dr. Williams to lead off this section with his presentation.
Thank you so much. I thought it would be helpful, and let me say it's an honor to be here with you and to be on this distinguished panel. I've learned a lot just from listening to all the wonderful colleagues, many of which I know, speak today. So I'm happy to join you in this. One of the issues I thought it was important to address was why is it that there's a lot of media coverage that Black people are so reluctant to take the vaccine? I'm going to end that maybe the problem is not as big as the media makes it out to be, but let me give some reason that has, for some populations, fostered some of the conspiracy theories that Dr. Berglund talked about. You see, if you look at history, there's a long history of medical exploitation and abuse of Black people in the United States as well as in other countries. But let me give you a couple US examples. Dr. Marion Sims, he is a physician of the 19th and early 20th century that is known as the father of modern gynecology. Most of the techniques used in surgery, gynecologic surgery, he developed them and they are still used today. The question is, how did he develop those techniques? Well, Dr. Marion Sims, when he lived in the southern United States, kept 4 female Black slaves for the sole purpose of medical experimentation. One of them, he performed surgeries on her 30 times in 4 years. Most of these surgeries performed without the use of any anesthesia. And then Dr. Sims moved from the South to New York City, and he continued to perfect his techniques of gynecologic surgery by operating on poor Irish women. And at that time in the United States, the Irish were not considered to be white. He exploited these poor Irish women in the wards of New York's Women's Hospital. There is outrage as more and more people understand the contribution and the abuse that this man engaged in. And in 2018, there was a huge statue of Dr. Marion Sims in Central Park in New York City. And in April of 2018, it was taken down, reflecting the awareness that although he has developed techniques that are used today, that the way in which it was developed is totally unacceptable. I'll give you one other quick example, and it is maybe the most infamous example. It's known as the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Tuskegee is the name of a place in Alabama. And in 1932, the United States government, the Public Health Service of the United States, physicians on the government payroll, directed a study in Tuskegee, Alabama. And what was the purpose of the study? To see what would happen in Black men with syphilis if the syphilis would remain untreated. Now, what is striking about that is, from a scientific point of view, we knew what would happen in people when syphilis remained untreated. Between 1890 and 1910, there was a study known as the Oslo Syphilis Study, where in Norway there wasn't good treatment, but there were good databases that kept records of people, and a group of people with syphilis had been followed over this period of time, and it was well documented physiologically what would happen. Why then, in 1932, in the United States, would these physicians decide to do this study? Well, they believed that Blacks might even be physiologically a different species from whites. And so findings from a study of whites could not be generalized to Blacks. And that therefore, this was a study from which important scientific information could be gained. So the study started in 1932. It continued all the way until 1972. And what happened in this study was the deception that the government engaged in. And remember, it's the government, and that's what has a lot of people very much on edge and very much skeptical about vaccines developed with government funding. And it was this. The men were not told that they were in a study. The men were told they were being brought in because they were getting treatment. In fact, they were not getting treatment. The researchers directing the study went to extraordinary lengths to give their names to the VD, as they were called in those days, clinics, to give their names to the public health system to say, do not treat these men, they are in a special study with us. There was deception of the men. So they were not getting treatment, but they would be given tonic water to drink and told that it was treatment. They wanted to do autopsies on the men when they died, and they didn't tell them they wanted to do autopsies. Instead, they told them, you know, when you feel very sick and you get into the end of life, if you come to the hospital, we will pay your burial expenses for you. But they took advantage of that opportunity. The men died in the hospital. They did autopsies without permission, without informing the men when they were alive or their families when they had died that the autopsies was done. So it was this extraordinary amount of deception. Penicillin became available during the course of the study, and they blocked the men from getting penicillin. And in 1969, an African American working at the CDC heard about the study. And he went to his superiors and said, how on earth could we doing this study for all these years? And the CDC convened a committee and in 1969 said, this study is valuable, we will continue. It was in 1972 when word of the study leaked out to the press, and the major media outlets in the United States covered this study that the government had been doing since 1932. That the study came to its end. And in fact, the government then, the Congress passed legislation that requires human subjects review before any study involving humans are done. That's the background. So there has been a history of exploitation of some populations, and I don't have time to talk about the Henry the Lax case and many other cases in Guatemala and in other countries that the United States government was involved in abuse and misuse. So that creates a context where many people are skeptical of a government provided a vaccine or any medical treatment. However, the news is not as bad as it is. So, for example, as of the end of April, the Kaiser Family Foundation did a study. 60% of white adults in the United States were vaccinated at that time, compared to 51% of blacks. So that's still a 9 percentage points difference. However, if you looked at the college educated, 78% of all college educated or higher blacks in the United States were vaccinated, compared to 76% of college educated whites. I'm not going to make much about the 2 percentage points difference. The point I'm making is it's not race that is driving the differences, it's education. Because if you look at blacks and whites at the same level of education, they were being, in fact, vaccinated at a higher rate. And part of that reflected the enormous effort that has been taken by many groups within the black community, including clergy and black leaders. Not all of them, but many of them have been at the forefront of sharing information with the community. They are trusted voices that, in fact, the vaccines are good, that, in fact, black people, black scientists were involved in the creation of some of the vaccines, particularly in the Moderna vaccine. A black scientist, Kismika Corbett, played a key critical role, and that the vaccines are beneficial, and that awareness and knowledge has had an impact. Another example of that outreach came from the National Academy of Medicine. It's a premier medical group in the United States. A number of Adventists have been elected. I'm aware of 3. I want to mention that only because the first black Seventh-day Adventist to be elected to the National Academy of Medicine is a son of Jamaica. That's Dr. E. Albert Reese. Was elected in 1998. I was elected in 2001. Dr. Benjamin Carson was elected in 2010. So there are Adventists in this group. But all of the black members came together, created an article that was published in the New York Times so that it could be covered by other media, and created a video that assured the black community, we sit next to you in church. We see you at the grocery stores. We are part of the community. We are scientists. We have devoted our lives to caring for others. This is good. We have participated in the creation of the vaccine. The vaccine is something good for you. So I think there has been good momentum towards increasing the numbers of Blacks taking part in the vaccine and rejecting some of the conspiracy theories and the false information, the misinformation that's out there about the vaccine. So that's my kind of opening statement about some background for one group and the role that the church has played at a local level. Many churches, not all churches, but many churches have played in giving the good news about the benefits of the vaccine.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams, for that historical background information that speaks to hesitancy that we're seeing today. But apparently things are making a turn for the better. Dr. Moncrief, having heard what we have heard today, are there any biblical guidelines for dealing with contagious diseases? Would you like to help us in that area?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you now.
Yeah, I believe that there are, but before.
You're muted.
Please unmute.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yes. Before I go into the matter of the contagious diseases, I find it interesting that there is so much focus now, particularly with regard to COVID-19, on the matter of washing your hands and all that kind of stuff. And I find it quite insightful to take a look at what the Bible has to say in this regard. And I'll try to make it as brief as I can.
Yes.
In the books of Exodus and Leviticus, let me go to Exodus first. The word wash, W-A-S-H, is used 13 times in Exodus and 34 times in Leviticus. Between those two books, the word wash is used 47 times. I didn't say 4, I didn't say 7, I said 47. That says that my God, our God, is concerned about hygiene. In the book of Leviticus, the word clean as an adjective is used 38 times. 38 times. And cleanse, the verb, is used 4 times. This tells me that our God was concerned about the whole matter of hygiene. And there are some passages which I don't pretend to understand, say that the priests, when they were to go into the sanctuary, they did not wash their hands, they would die. I don't understand why, but if God says so, there must be something behind it. It says you got to wash your hands and your feet, by the way, before you come in here, so that you will not die. So God has made it very clear that the whole question of proper hygiene is very, very crucial. When we want to look at the whole matter of how to deal with these kinds of diseases, Leviticus chapter 13 is the most concise presentation we have in the Bible of how they dealt with leprosy. Leprosy, a very contagious disease, which I didn't realize until I started doing this research, is also airborne. I just presumed it had to do with physical touch, but that's not quite the case. And when one looks at Leviticus chapter 13, there are many, many things that we have now. Testing, retesting, isolation, retesting, isolation, retesting, all those things are there clearly outlined. It was not a matter of whether I want to or I don't want to. It was a standard mandate that God gave. So God wants us to do whatever it takes to get these things done. And I'll just add here, on one occasion, Jesus healed a man who was a leper. Jesus is God. He knows that this man is healed because he, the Creator, has healed him. And he still says to the man, go to the priest, because they're the ones that are supposed to designate you as healed. It's not because Jesus did not know that the man was healed. He healed him. We have to recognize that there is a place for organized systems of doing things, and we have to be willing to recognize that. But the whole matter of cleanliness and the matter of being willing to be tested again and again, sometimes there was a halfway house to get tested, they put in a halfway house. and you got tested again after about 7 days before you could go back to your family. So these are things that we're not seeing any of that right now, but the matter of being isolated in that kind of way, sort of having colonies, as it were, for those who are sick that way. And even the matter of wearing a mask. In Leviticus chapter 13 and verse 45, you're told that they had to wear a mask. And they also had to say unclean, unclean, and so on. So the whole idea of covering your face to prevent others from getting what you have, or as we now have it to prevent yourself from getting what others have, that is something that was there from scriptures. And of course, we do have the very wonderful text in 3 John verse 2, is asking for us to be in health, prosper and be in health, as also will prosper. So God has always been concerned about our physical well-being. And let me just push one bit further on this and just finish on what I'm saying here. We know today that there are many individuals who are concerned about whether they should or should not, and I'm not going to talk about that. I'm sure when we get back to some of those further questions, or medical professionals will tell us some more about that. But I'd like us to note that there are what God promises people when they do what they should do, that He will grant to them peace. And it's interesting that in this quarter's lesson, we're learning about peace in Christ. The word rendered peace primarily in the King James is the Hebrew word shalom. And here's a range of meanings of the word shalom. When God gives you peace, He gives you all of this. Peace, completeness, quietness, serenity, tranquility, contentment, wholeness, well-being, soundness, welfare, perfection, safety, security, health, prosperity. All of that is wrapped up in this word. And when we're told in Isaiah chapter 46, so I think I have the incorrect reference here, when we're told by the Lord that He will keep us in what the King James has as perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on Him. What we have there is the word shalom repeated. We have shalom, shalom. And it's the only case where we have the word repeated, and it's rendered as perfect peace. But God wants us to have peace. Mention already been made about our immune system and the T cells and so on, so I won't go into that. But it's important to remember that being stressed out greatly reduces your body's ability to function properly, particularly with respect to the immune system. And so trusting in God, having confidence in Him, and allowing Him to be the one to take care of things for you, that is a way to help to keep your immune system as good as it can be. I will address any further questions that might come later on, but those are 2 or 3 points I wanted to make sure to say up front.
Okay, I think you have done well in prosecuting that area. And I just have one quick one for you, because we are people who believe in last day events. And so in apocalyptic parlance, is COVID-19 one of the last plagues, do you think, from your study? Did we lose him? Okay, seems as if he's having a little difficulty there with his equipment. And so I'll come back to that. Now, Dr. Williams, if I trust God to protect me, why do I need to take the vaccine?
Yes, I have heard that raised by many people, many Christians. Just this week, someone told my wife, an Adventist told my wife, I don't need to take the vaccine, I'm trusting God. I think the Bible is clear that while we trust God, that doesn't mean we don't act prudently. And just think about it in your everyday life. I trust God, but I brush my teeth every night. I don't trust that because I trust in God that I'm going to be protected from cavities if I don't brush my teeth. I trust God, but I put on my seatbelt when I drive my car. I trust God, but I lock the doors in my house at night. I trust God, but follow the steps He's given me for my good health. So we act prudently, we do that which we can, and then we ask God to bless it. I want to share a quotation from the book Counsels on Health. This is what the Spirit of Prophecy says: God will not work a miracle to keep those from sickness who have no care for themselves, but are continually violating the laws of health and making no efforts to prevent disease. The
Ah,
vaccine is one effort to prevent disease, and it continues: when we do all we can on our part to have health, then may we expect the blessed results will follow, and we can ask God in faith to bless the efforts for the preservation of health. That's Counsels on Health, page 59. So, trust in God, we still act prudently and take those steps that we can, asking God to bless our efforts.
well, I am sure glad I asked you that question, because we had time to really unpack that. Does the Spirit of Prophecy really, since you have gone into that area, say anything about vaccines? Have you experienced anything in your search?
That is a really good question. Ellen White does not write about vaccines. However, when there was a smallpox epidemic in her area, Ellen White got vaccinated. There was no FDA in those days, by the way. And so the vaccines, the smallpox vaccine she took, did not even have all of the wonderful precautions and study that we have heard about today. There was some study, but it wasn't to the level that we have today. So
Okay.
Ellen White not only got vaccinated, but she urged her helpers to be vaccinated also. In taking this step, she acknowledged the evidence that vaccination either rendered her immune from smallpox or greatly lightens its effects, and she also recognized the danger of her helpers exposing others if they fail to be vaccinated. So I think she gave us a wonderful example in her own practice of acting prudently and asking God to bless.
Yes, excellent. And I remember reading somewhere where she advised in that same smallpox episode, maybe in another place, someone asked her if they would sin if they took the vaccine, and she said, "No, I expect everybody to use common sense."
Right, exactly.
That was her exact quotation, as I recall, and so I think that would be very applicable. Um, so then, tell me, if I say, does what I say about vaccine affect anybody else other than me?
That is a really, really good question, because we have talked about the conspiracy theories Dr. Berglund talked about. We talked about a lot of misinformation. We talk about a lot of videos that people have sent me on WhatsApp from the Caribbean as well as from across the United States. A lot of them having misinformation. As a Christian, do I have any responsibility with what I do? I think as a Christian, we want to follow the example of Jesus. Jesus spent most of his life not healing the sick, but working as a carpenter. And in the book Desire of Ages, it tells us was not willing to be defective even in the handling of tools. He was perfect as a workman as he was perfect in character. Jesus brought his A game to everything he did, and he wants us to do the same. Why? Ellen White, I go to Counsels on Health again, page 142. She said, if people see that we are intelligent with regard to health, then they will be more ready to believe that we are sound in Bible doctrines. We are not just here on this earth for no purpose. We are representing Jesus. We are spreading the good news of his coming, the good news of salvation. And what the Spirit of Prophecy is saying is that if we speak foolishness when it comes to health, people will listen to us and they will dismiss Jesus. They will dismiss the message of his soon coming because we provided them inaccurate information when it came to health. So, yes, we have a responsibility to study to show ourselves approved unto God. Get the facts, get accurate information. The health message is the right arm, the entering wedge of us being successful in reaching the secular mind of today with the gospel. We need to be accurate in the information we provide. That's part of our witness to our master.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Williams. I wish we had more time to, to explore this section a little more. I'll just ask you one quick last one, is how should we treat others who view life differently than we do with respect to taking the vaccine?
I'm glad you.
Give me 30 seconds.
Let me do it in 30 seconds. I'm glad you asked that question because that's important. I think Dr. Berglund mentioned that in the Adventist Church, there are divisions among many Adventists about the vaccine and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. We should never forget that first and foremost, we are Christians. Jesus says, "By this shall men know that ye are my disciples." Not if you have love only for one another, but if you love one another as I have loved you. So we have to treat each person with dignity and respect, whether we agree or disagree with them.
Oh, thank you very much, Drs. Williams and Moncrief, for enlightening our darkness with respect to this, sharing with us this very important information, which I hope we can use to avoid extremes in our interpretations and practice of faith and learn the lesson of tolerance and Christian charity to others who see things differently. Thanks to our listeners and viewers for tuning in here. And Dr. Moncrief, you
I apologize for the cutoff. I don't know what went wrong, but I had it 46 and got back on.
Yes, sorry about that. But I think we're out of time because we got to share.
I understand. I realize that. I understand.
Yes, okay. And so over to you, brother moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Wow, 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 wow. Such, I mean, I was spellbound there, you know, and amazing knowledge. Thank you very much for sharing. We're now going to go into open forum, and there are some questions that came up in each segment, and this is open for any panelist to answer. I'm going to ask our moderators to get ready to ask some questions that came up. I'm going to ask our panelists. There may be things that you felt important that you needed to bring forward and to share this. And we want to wrap up within the next 20 minutes or so. So I hope we're about getting ready to get to the very intense part of this. So thank you. So let me ask Dr. Drake, if you can get prepared to complete you have something to share, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Copeland if there's another question from this segment, and we'll rotate back to psychology, then to religion. So keep your questions coming in. Go ahead, Dr. Drake.
Yes, hi, thank you very much. I want to say a couple of things. One, I am an infectious disease physician at Vanderbilt. I actually take care of COVID patients. I lead COVID trials. I actually do research in COVID as well as interstitial lung disease. And I want you to understand there's nothing worse than watching somebody die a death that they didn't have to. You know, I've taken care of, I live in Tennessee, although I live in Nashville, which is blue. Every other place in Tennessee is pretty much red. And so it's a lot of anti-vaxxers. And there's nothing worse than, I mean, people are saying the health message, and you're not wrong. There is data. There's data published from Harvard, Hopkins, and Columbia showing that health practitioners with significant COVID exposure, whether it was in the ICU, serving as an ID infectious disease consultant like myself, who were vegetarians, were significantly less likely to be infected. And if they were, they had less severe disease compared to people that ate meat. So I do believe there is a role for the health message. The problem comes when we bow down to either the health message or we bow down to vaccines. Our faith has to be in God and not in a particular method. I am vaccinated and I'm vegetarian. I'm not either or, I'm both. And so one of the things we have to do is do what we can. You know, I think what I'm trying to encourage people to do, and I'm more than happy to send the article because a different group just published a distinct study showing that if you're on a vegetarian diet and you contract COVID, you get less severe disease. So, but does that mean that you don't get the vaccine? And I think, you know, I'm not pushing people to get the vaccine. I understand the more you push it, the more they dig their heels in. You know, but I think you have to understand that, you know, your risk of dying, and I've seen people that run marathons, get this back, who refused to get vaccinated, and we couldn't turn them around, and they died, even though they were healthy. And that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Dr. Copeland, I'm going to ask you to raise one question, and then we'll go to psychology, and I'm going to ask our panelists to be quite brief in your responses, or appropriately as you respond. Go ahead, Dr. Copeland.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So we have another question here, and it's about, what would you say to someone concerned about the impact of the vaccines on their fertility? And any one of our panelists could field that question. What would you say to someone concerned about the impact of the vaccines on their fertility?
So I'm not aware of any data to suggest that the vaccine affects fertility. I know if you're pregnant, you can get it irrespective of the stage of the trimester of pregnancy. You can get it when you're breastfeeding. There's no harm to the mother, the fetus. I'm not aware of any literature that suggests that it impacts fertility. I'm just not aware of it.
And I will also confirm that I'm not aware of any data suggesting otherwise. It's fairly safe for pregnant women to get the vaccine. And I can give you a story. It's a very sad story out here in California. Both the husband and the wife, she was pregnant, decided they were not going to take the vaccine. They both had COVID. She died during childbirth. She was not able to see the child. And she had 4 other children. So she died, leaving 5 children. The husband also died. They both died, leaving 5 children. That's preventable. That is preventable. So I would encourage, just like Dr. Williams have said, just like in the wilderness, when they were being bitten by a snake, they had a snake that was put up. And if you look at it, you will live. We have provided something to save our lives. And this is very important. Just think about the health message and our responsibility for our neighbors. This is something that the Lord has allowed us to partner with him in protecting ourselves. And so it is very safe, and certainly we should take it. We shouldn't let common sense die.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Do I have time for one, or you're going to go on?
We'll get back to you. We're going to do
Okay.
round robin. So we're going to go over to psychology, and then we'll get back to you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dr. Berglund, I have a quick question for you. Are people who believe in conspiracy theories mentally ill?
No, I not in general. We can't say that. Belief in conspiracy is so common, and it's basically something we all do when something happens. We try to understand what's going on, and we create theories and models for understanding what happened, and that's what conspiracy theories also are. And it's important to say that some conspiracy theories turn out to be true. Like sometimes there are ideas about conspiracy theories, people propose them, and then eventually sort of evidence reveals that it actually was true. Like the Watergate scandal was one example of that. It was like a theory for a while. People were suspecting that there was a conspiracy, and eventually it proved to be the case. So this is, conspiracy theories are a meaning-making activity that we are doing. We're trying to make sense of things and understand things. The problem is when we don't listen and don't deal with the actual evidence that is there, whether it's for or against the conspiracy theory. And that's what we need. Like some people, it becomes problematic when people cling to something that is quite clear in general that it is lacking evidence. There is no support for it, but they still hold on to it in a way to explain what's going on. And that's one of the problems that we have with COVID-19, quite wild conspiracy theories that are being circulated. both by people who probably with good intent share them, but we also know there's intentional disinformation going on, bad actors that are spreading information in order to confuse people and potentially to harm societies, to harm states, and to see people dying. And that's not, then it's very problematic. Then we need to reject that kind of conspiracy theories.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Moderator.
And over to the religion and faith theology sector. You muted, Dr. Wellington.
All right, I'm here. I have a question that I would want to direct to Dr. Moncrief, since you were out for a while. From a biblical standpoint, are mandates for correct social behavior inherently wrong?
Certainly not, because we have a number of mandates in the scriptures. With respect to health issues, for example, as I mentioned, and I'm going to suggest that all of us take the time to comb through Leviticus chapter 13 and see some of those guidelines. Things that people were told they needed to do and they had to do them. I can picture myself being hesitant to shave off my eyebrows. That was a requirement for those who had leprosy at some point. You shave off all your hair, shave off your beard, shave off your eyebrows. These were mandates that were given to deal with a particular issue because your life was affecting the lives of other individuals. And I wish we had time to look at the whole matter of what God says, the concern we should have about our fellow human beings and how we should treat them. Because he teaches us very, very clearly that even if it's inconvenient for us, we must do it anyhow. We're even told if a person who hates you, his animal goes astray, you catch it, you take it home, you take care of it. And when the person comes, you give it to them, you don't charge them anything. A person that you know hates you, he's telling lies about you, doing all kinds of evil things to you. And your obligation still is to take care of his animal. That's the kind of extent to which God says we must take care of our brothers and our sisters because we are their keepers. So in that regard, mandates that are intended to protect and preserve are there for us. I came across a very interesting little joke on my computer not long ago, where a young man was saying he objects to the fact that he has to go to school every day because he does not particularly want to learn and he's being forced to go to school and learn. And in nearly every state in this country, I don't know about the figures for the other states now, but in the state of Florida where I reside, if a student misses 15 days of class over a 3-month period, he can be arrested and charged with truancy. Not only he, but his family members. And we accept all of that because it serves a purpose to make sure that nobody is left behind. So the idea of mandating things is not inherently wrong. I'm not saying everything that's mandated is right or is not wrong just because it is mandated, if it makes sense. And we have to use our own common sense, which is not always common, to see what are the things that make sense. And when we see some of the things happening right now, we should be able to make a sound decision regarding some of the mandates that are made. And usually, some things have to be mandated because we won't do what we're supposed to do. That's the bottom line.
Okay, and so we have a social responsibility.
Yes, we do.
And that should also be taken into consideration. Over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, as we make one last round, we'll make a round. We're going to try, we are now at 7 o'clock. I'm going to ask and indulge that we go until 7:15. So we're going to, so I'm going to ask that you be very direct with your responses. Short responses now for this lap here. Back to you now for the science.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, I'm glad there's understanding.
Well, I hope somebody understands something. Siri or otherwise. Back to you, Dr. Copeland. Let's quickly go through these rounds. Let's try to get 2 minutes or 2 or 3 minutes for each segment. Please go ahead.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Here's another question. Are pharmaceutical companies and doctors downplaying natural remedies so that they can make more money from vaccines. And any of our panelists can feel that question.
Well, there is no doubt they're making a ton of money. Pfizer made $33 billion last quarter, but there's also no doubt that they're saving lives. So I think, until it's so expensive that we can't vaccinate people, I don't think we can dissuade that. And there is literature about the benefits of the health message, such as a vegetarian diet and protecting against the severity of SARS. So I don't think it's fair to say that people aren't discussing health reform and its role in this disease, because it's not true. I mean, I read 2 papers this week about it. I mean, these were from non-Adventists actually publishing this. We have not heard from our church on the role of the health message in SARS-CoV severity.
I'd like to add a little piece here, is that vaccine hesitancy has been on the World Health Organization list of global threats to health prior to the SARS-CoV-2.
Yeah, that's true.
However, so if I were a pharmaceutical manufacturer and I wanted to make money, it would not be in my best interest to choose a vaccine as the way to make the money. It is the reason why there's so much things that dissuade a pharmaceutical company from doing vaccines. And that is why the United States government actually covers any injuries associated with vaccines, because it could not incentivize pharmaceutical companies to get involved. So while companies are in business to make money, I definitely understand that we don't want to cut off our face or nose to spite our face.
Right.
They're doing strong work, and we need to be able to distinguish those two things. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. We're going on speed now. So over to psychology.
Okay, Dr. Barrington Brennan, I would like you to comment on this statement. My freedom to do whatever I want to do ends when your health begins. Comment.
Yes, that is so true. My former teacher, Dr. Moncrief's, when he was speaking, what came to mind is speed limits. A speed limit on a highway is a mandate. I am free to drive 135 miles an hour, 150 miles an hour, but the government says no, because I can cause an accident. So my freedom ends when your health begins or your safety begins. So we have these kinds of examples all around us, and we have these inconsistencies in applying to our lives. So yes, I have freedom, but I have to consider you as my fellow being. I'm free to talk loudly, but you are sleeping. I'm free to run across the street, but a car may come and hit me. We have to make decisions, because faith does, or freedom does not eliminate common sense.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Moderator.
And go right over to theology.
Okay. I'm going to direct this to Dr. Williams. And yeah, the trust factor is highlighted as a challenge. Now, deaths from COVID-19 has surpassed the 1918 flu pandemic. Or the non-medical, non-scientific person who is being bombarded with a tsunami of misinformation or disinformation. There's confusion, generally. Are there any tips or scriptural counsels you could offer to help such individuals sort out the facts, or, helping them in personal decision making?
This is a really good question. I think we are living in a time where we are told in these last days, when there will be deceptions and you can think of conspiracy theories as one type of deceptions, that if it were possible, the very elect should be deceived. And how do we protect ourselves from those deceptions is we study to show ourselves approved unto God. So if we know the truth, then we can identify when they don't speak according to the law and to the testimony. I think the same is true in science. I was reading something. There have been more than 500,000 scientific papers published on the subject of COVID-19 since the pandemic has started. No individual can master all of that scientific literature, but there are places you can go to that are credible sources. The World Health Organization's website, the Centers for Disease Control's website, a number of universities has websites. The General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists on the Health Ministry's page has a COVID-19 resource. The the Adventist Health System in the eastern half of the United States, on their webpage has a COVID-19 resource. Many universities, my university, Harvard School of Public Health, Johns Hopkins University School of Public Health, has COVID-19 resources with credible information. So what I would say is the way in the spiritual realm, we have to go, what does the Bible say?
Yes.
Please only use credible resources, not everything that is written. Because it's online, because it's in a book, because there's a video about it, doesn't mean it's accurate. Just as we bring those spiritual lenses, we need to bring that same lens to the scientific world and trust credible information from credible sites.
Thank you very much. That's been awesome. Over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And at this time, I'm going to ask panelists. I'm going to throw one question out, and I'm going to ask our panelists to respond, and at the same time to share with the audience one takeaway point that you like to leave, that you like each person to leave with. Something may not have been mentioned. You didn't have time to do this, but a question is, our bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit. Why should I be putting foreign particles or nanoparticles in my body? And I see this text and I see this coming out quite often, that why, could you address that? And this could be ended to any of the panelists or moderators. I see that question coming in a lot into the chat.
So the nanoparticles that are used in both the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, those components are regular parts of our body. They're lipids. It's part of what we make. That's why that's being used to allow that message to be able to get into the cell. Now, I say it again, it just gets that message into the cell so the cell can translate that message into a protein that will prime our immune system to make the right antibodies to protect us from the disease. So my takeaway as an Adventist, as a Christian, I have responsibility as somebody who believes in the health message. I have responsibilities for my neighbor. I need to protect them, and I need to share the truth about this pandemic. Mm-hmm. I have that responsibility.
Thank you, Dr. Drake.
Oh, yes, sir. I just would encourage people to pray. Even though I'm an infectious disease doctor, I was initially concerned about the vaccine, but I prayed. And asked the Lord to just give me guidance. This was before a lot of the data had come out. And, he told me what was right for me, And so, I think we try to make people feel bad if they don't get the vaccine, like they're sinning, and they aren't. They're scared. And we have to respect that. But there is a God in heaven, and you can pray to him, and he will tell you what to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Campbell.
I would just like to say that the vaccine is a very powerful tool that we have available to us to get us through this pandemic. It is not the only tool that's available, but it is the most powerful. So in addition to the vaccine, we adhere to other health principles. We ourselves are Adventists, we are Bible believing, We believe in prayer. We believe in God. And I don't dictate to God how to protect me. I think God has been kind to us in this pandemic, giving us brilliant minds to create this vaccine. And the vaccine, social distancing, masking, good health, good sleep, good diet, all together help to protect us as well as others so that we can end this pandemic.
Thank you. Pastor Brennan.
I would encourage everyone to take care of themselves and turn off the radio or television as often as you can, not to allow yourself to be continually confused and troubled by conspiracy theories. Enjoy the sunlight, get up and move around. You know, one of the things they tell us, if you get COVID, I'm not talking about those who are sick in the hospital, you need to get up to help prevent it from going further. Same thing mentally and psychologically. We need to get out of ourselves and experience the world even in a little small cocoon so we can better take care of ourselves. Remember, faith does not eliminate common sense.
Thank you. Dr. Berglund.
Yes, what I'm concerned about is all the conflict and division that this is causing. I believe that's the work of the devil. And as Christians, as Adventists, we should not succumb to that. Like if we vilify one another, if we attack one another, ridicule, humiliate those who have a different view than we have, we're just going to push them further away. That's not the way we can have a meaningful, constructive dialogue. So as been said, there's a lot of fear going on, there's a lot of uncertainty, there's lots of confusion. We need to be safe people with one another and have interactions where we are nice, where we are compassionate, where we are understanding, where we're willing to listen. That doesn't mean we have to agree on things, but at least that we can, as Christians, and has been mentioned that we are known by the way we love one another, and we love one another in a Christ-like way, as Dr. Williams said. I think that is a huge challenge that we all must take on in this situation that we're in. So that's my appeal.
Thank you. And Dr. Moncrief.
If we look at what Jesus did with the woman caught in adultery in John chapter 8, he said, girl, I don't condemn you, but don't take my not condemning you to mean I condone what you're doing. Go and sin no more. We have to be willing, as has been pointed out, to accept people who might see things somewhat different from we do. But until they come to see it the way that we see it, we should not hold them at arm's length and refuse to accept them until they see it as we see it. We set the right example, we do the best that we can, and we keep on loving them and supporting them. That is the way to go. God has given us in the scriptures guidelines as to how we should take care of our bodies as a part of our stewardship, to take care of our bodies. He has given to the Seventh-day Adventist Church special information, more than other Christian organizations have. And sometimes it bothers me a bit when I realize that things like Kellogg's cornflakes was created to help us get away from eating meat. Now, that's gone. Lots of things that we had done. There are people who are now making a mint of money in health spas and so on. What are they basing what they're doing on? Ellen G. White's Ministry of Health. They are cashing in on what we are failing to use. And I think one of my great concerns is for us to allow ourselves as God's agents with the three angels message. This health piece is a crucial part of that as well. And we need to do our part in sharing it with others.
Thank you. And Dr. Williams, and immediately after Dr. Williams gives his wrapping up thought, I'm going to ask the technical team to play that video that should have been played earlier, immediately after Dr. Williams gives his takeaways.
Thank you. I have two quick takeaways. Number one, for many Adventists, we seem to be making a distinction between the health message and scientific findings. God is the greatest scientist in the world, in the universe.
Amen.
Every
You're muted. You're muted.
You went muted. Wow.
I don't know what happened, didn't touch anything. Every gleam of scientific findings is a reflection of the mind of God, education tells us. Spirit of prophecy says science rightly understood. So rightly understood is an important caveat, does not conflict with the word of God. Each sheds light on the other. So we need to understand science rightly, but recognize it's one way in which God speaks to us. And my final point, as we make a decision, and I completely agree, you need to go and ask the Holy Spirit, everyone, to direct you of what you need to do. But keep in family. It's about people around you. It's about the effect you have of others. How do you take care of your neighbor? How do you make the love of Jesus real? All of these issues are bound up. Because whether I or not I get vaccinated, it's not just about me. By the way, I got vaccinated as soon as I could. But it's about the effect I have on others. So keep that in mind as you wrestle with the Holy Spirit. And if you honestly seek, God has promised He will give you the guidance you need to make the right decision for you.
Okay, I'm going to ask the technical team to play that video at this time. And please go
We
ahead.
are Black
Yes.
American members of the National Academy of Medicine.
And public health experts.
We are also sisters,
Mothers, wives, and daughters.
We are brothers,
fathers, husbands, and sons.
We are your neighbor. The person in line at the grocery store checkout. The person sitting next to you in church. We are members of the Black community.
Many of us have fought our way into healthcare professions specifically to care for our community.
Many of us have devoted our careers to exposing racism in healthcare.
All of us have focused our careers on improving health for all.
That is why we support the COVID-19 vaccine, and we encourage you to get vaccinated.
Trust in government does not come easily for our community. Too often our health has been ignored and even abused.
It is not surprising that polls show that many Black Americans are hesitant to get vaccinated.
We understand why.
But COVID-19 is very serious.
And it has a devastating impact on our community.
We have come through so much over the years.
Now we are facing another life-threatening challenge.
We must do what we have always done.
We must choose to do what is necessary for our community's survival.
As health professionals, we understand the science.
As members of the Black community, we understand your distrust.
We have reviewed the research.
Some of us have participated in developing the vaccines, designing the studies, and monitoring the results.
And we are confident the research was done correctly.
Many of us have already received the vaccine.
The rest of us will get it when our turn comes.
We encourage you to claim your place in line to get vaccinated.
Do it for yourselves.
Do it for your loved ones.
Do it for our community.
Do it because we should not tolerate one more preventable death.
I want to thank our panelists, and I want to just highlight the work that's been done by our panelists and such an illustrious group that have committed their lives in ministry for God. This is not just a vocation that they're in, but they're in ministry for God. And before we wrap up, and I want to express appreciation to each, we're indebted to you. Dr. Drake, would in less than a minute, could you address that question? I think there's a question on ivermectin.
Oh, I'm sorry, was there a question? So there's no data to support the efficacy of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine against SARS-CoV-2.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Ari?
Dr. Edwards?
Yeah, let me just say here that both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine were being used at Loma Linda as treatment against COVID, but when you look at the totality of the evidence, it doesn't support it, so they no longer use it there.
Thank you too. Thank you. Thank you. So here we have, yes. So we have this group of scientists and researchers here to have shared the knowledge. And as we wrap up here, I just want to say thank you to the media group, the media team, for your amazing job, your commitment to getting this out on this platform. Certainly, we see in the Bible, we have tried to make an effort to provide knowledge to you today. Well, ladies and gentlemen, knowledge, beyond knowledge, calls for wisdom. The Bible says if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault. I encourage you to take the knowledge that you have had today from this illustrious group and to apply to speak to God and allow God to give us the wisdom. He has given us that promise. If you lack wisdom, don't confuse knowledge with wisdom. God gives you that wisdom to apply. If you ask God, He certainly will give you that wisdom. Dr. Smith, who chaired this team, and to get this panel out, I want to say thank you. It was my privilege to work alongside with you, and I'm happy that even before the vaccine was out, even though you went through COVID, you pulled it through, and you are a fighter, and you have a commitment to ensure that the work continued, and the pain that you went through, other persons would not go through. So thank you, and I want to turn this over to you and ask that you close with prayer.
Thank you so much. To all our panelists, our moderators, the NCU media team, or NCU president, to all our viewers, to each and every one of you, I want to say a big, big thank you. I know so many have been blessed. I myself have been blessed. And as you rightly said, Dr. Clayton, I don't know about COVID by what I read or what I hear on the news, etc. I know about COVID because of those 18 days that I spent in the hospital. To God be the glory. May God bless each and every one of you. Stay safe and be strong. Let us bow our heads. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much with the wisdom you have given your children. We thank you for these distinguished individuals who have come, Lord, not for self-glory, but to proclaim your name in their fields, to show to your people what's right and what is good. Oh Lord, we are not here to put any group or anyone down. We're here to stay on the side of facts and truth and to present it as best as we can. And if we have said or done anything not pleasing or acceptable in your sight, we ask that you will forgive. We thank you for using us in such a powerful way. We thank you for this dedicated team and for the work they're doing, not just here for today, Lord, but what they have been doing, helping humanity, and what they will continue to do. Inspire and bless them, I pray. Thank you. I put our listening audience into your hands and pray that you will be done in their lives and that you will magnify your blessings upon them. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen and amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're off air now.